America was the ideological sort of backstop for international free trade. What happens to the rest of the world, sir?
That's the biggest contribution of Mr. Trump. Trade, which used to be on the business pages. In fact, last column, he brought it to the front. Most of the big economies abjectly surrendered before Trump.
It is that you are not doing enough to stop the imports of forced labor into your country, and therefore the US will investigate you. So it's just naked bullying, sir.
We should have continued buying Russian oil. We should say, America, no, sorry, it's our sovereign decision. Our exports are less than $20 billion to China. Trade agreements, they are just the periphery. If you have a good product, it will sell. But we have people, we have passionate people, we have to just plan. We stop planning about all these things.
Hi, folks. I suppose what I'm going to say next is the most cliche repeated statement of the past year, but the rules-based world trade order as we know it is fracturing. The US has weaponized tariffs, the WTO is effectively paralyzed, and while globalization still stands strong, its nature is changed, as every country is scrambling to secure its place in the new paradigm. India is no exception to this. In response, we're signing trade deals at an unusual pace, navigating a delicate negotiation with the US and confronting a long-deferred but urgent question. Can we finally build the manufacturing base our ambitions require? To make sense of it all, we spoke to Ajay Srivastava. He is the founder of the Global Trade Research Initiative, one of India's sharpest independent voices on trade, whose work we've often referred to on the Daily Brief. His experiences are informed by his long time in the Indian Trade Service, giving him hands-on experience in trade policy making, WTO negotiations, and free trade agreement talks. Interestingly, he's also the first ever student to be admitted into the Indian School of Business. We hope you enjoy this conversation.
Ajay sir, thank you so much for coming and joining us on this video. Sir, I started listening to your videos and the podcasts, I think sometime last year when this entire situation in the US was starting. And I think everyone else that I was listening to was looking at it from a very myopic lens about Nifty mein kya ho raha hai, Sensex mein kya ho raha hai. And then I heard you, sir, and you were talking about how we imported nail clippers. And just to see someone who understood trade with that degree of depth, sir, it was absolutely fascinating. So we are extremely happy to have you on with us on this show, sir. So welcome.
Thanks, Pranav, for inviting me.
So I think it's just a very interesting thing to talk to someone that has been in your position, sir, because I believe you spent your entire life working in international trade, and for a long time I imagine a lot of that was just a lot of very highly niche, highly specific things like what does the MFN status with such and such country require about HSN classification number so and so, and then suddenly in just a few months it's become probably the most important thing that is happening in the entire world, sir. So what is just this transition like from your eyes, sir?
That's the biggest contribution of Mr. Trump. These trade news which used to be on the business pages. In fact, last column of the business pages, he brought it to the front. And now most people talk about MFN. They understand MFN. A lot of trade jargon has become mainstream. That's his spectacular contribution to the trade.
So, sir, I think in your entire career until very recently, sir, America was the leading sort of pole of free trade internationally. And then somewhere around 2017, that starts to get slightly derailed. And then last year, we've all seen, of course, what has happened. Now, my question, sir, is that given that America was the ideological sort of backstop for international free trade, now that it has changed its mind, what happens to the rest of the world, sir? Do you think that someone else just takes its mantle? Or do you think that the world will just move away from free trade because America has vacated its spot?
The problem is, last 1 year it convinced me that America is the real superpower. May not be in the positive sense I'm talking, but I thought the countries have their own minds and they talk about whatever suits them. But the way things happened in the past 1 year after Mr. Trump imposed tariffs, most of the big economies abjectly surrendered before Trump. I have friends in Europe. I was talking to them. They say, no, we are not going to surrender. We are going to negotiate trade deal with them. But they surrendered. Japan, such a big economy, such a competitive economy, they surrendered abjectly before Trump. South Korea, Malaysia, Indonesia, forget about smaller countries. So except for China, Russia, and few more countries, Nobody was willing to even talk as equals before Mr. Trump. Everybody surrendered and agreed to abject terms in the trade deals with the US. That persuaded me that US is a real superpower, not in the good sense, but they're the real one. Nobody stands before them. All these Europeans and Japanese, they may be good, but when it comes to America, I mean, they simply abjectly surrender. And so there is no one to take mantle of America. China, of course, stands head to head, shoulder to shoulder before America, but nobody is willing to concede that China will become the global leader. China has to work on many other areas before people recognize their strength. They are only manufacturing superpower. They are not bigger in many other indices. So there is no one after America. It will be a vacuum, I think, and that will be filled by more than 10 countries.
It's a very sort of new world that we've entered, sir. So it's actually extremely confusing, I think, sitting in India to even see a world like this. I think when I was younger, when I was in college, for instance, what we understood was that the world had understood trade and it was just India's job to match up with the world. And now that entire sort of foundation has shifted under our feet, sir. So, sir, in a very uncertain, fragmented sort of world, how should India look at its options? In the sense that I'm sure that there are a lot of problems that will arise that did not exist before that we'll have to, take care of. I'm sure there are also a lot of opportunities that a time of chaos like this throws up. So, if I am India, what is the picture that sort of emerges in front of me?
Three, four things are there. We have to keep our strategy very simple. First is, all these disruptions are happening. So we have to enter into trade relationships, trade agreements with all our important trading partners that we are doing so that we are not in for the surprise. Once you negotiate a trade deal, you are assured of a certain tariff, zero tariff or 5% or 10%, but you can predict it. It will be lower than that charge on most of the other trading partners. So one is trade deal. We should do trade deals with important partner countries, number one. And second, more important than trade deal is that we have to set our house in order. A country globally is as important as its military and its economics. Military, nobody is going to bomb us, so let's focus on economics. So China has become so powerful because they control 30% of world's manufacturing. We have to work internally to become better manufacturer. We have to focus on specific actions that we should take to become those. These disruptions, they will not affect us too much. Suppose you are a maker of iPhone, you are inventor of iPhone. I don't say you are assembler of iPhone, you are inventor of products like iPhones or some high-tech products or satellites. Then whatever is happening in the world, people will be buying your product. So if we have a product, then we have less to worry about the global disruptions. So I think this is the time we should focus totally inward and we should strengthen our manufacturing, our services, our so many sectors we need to strengthen.
Absolutely, sir. But I think my fellow Pranav over here has a lot of questions on exactly that. But before that, sir, I just wanted to get one more question to just understand the wider world, sir. I think recently the American Supreme Court gave the world a little bit of relief from the tariffs. I think a lot of people have been celebrating that fact that the emergency tariffs have been struck down. But sir, I think now that I'm reading the papers, I am seeing, these portents of darker things to come. So there are all these Section 301 investigations where they have been expanded sort of far beyond anything that people previously imagined, and 60 countries have been dragged into fairly sort of facile allegations. So I just wanted to know, sir, sitting here, how should we look at the state of the world coming ahead after, this first round of tariffs?
So let's have a quick recap of what happened in the past 1 year. Incidentally, today is the first birthday or anniversary, whatever you call, of the Trump's the tariffs. He imposed for the first time on 2nd of April. So today it completes 1 full year, second year. So he came with the idea that he'll be imposing high tariffs on trading partners, and then he'll be using that high tariffs to intimidate countries to enter into quick trade deals with the US. These high tariffs, they were violating all the WTO rules, but Trump being Trump, he used one particular US act called US Emergency Economic Power Act, International Emergency Economic Power Act. He used that and he extracted trade deals. And as we discussed that European Union, Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, almost everybody entered a trade deal one after the other with the US. And the trade deals, they were so one-sided. For example, European Union agreed Trump will be lowering its reciprocal tariffs from 25% to 15%. In return, Europe will be investing more than $500 billion in America, will be buying $750 billion of energy products from America in the next 3 years, will be eliminating tariffs on most of the American goods entering Europe. Similar kind of obligations were taken by Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, almost everybody, totally one-sided. From the US side, the wager was that we'll be reducing those reciprocal tariffs, which Mr. Trump imposed for the first time on April 2. Why countries were agreeing for this? Because US is the largest market. You know, they buy most. How they buy most, why they buy most? Because they can print dollars. They don't have to earn dollars like other countries. They spend most. So it's the top destination, export destination for most of the countries. So people thought Trump may go after 1 or 2 years. So why disrupt our largest trading partner, largest export destination? Let's keep selling to them. And they agreed for this one-sided terms. But then the things changed. On 20th of February, US Supreme Court, it held that Trump's tariffs were not compatible with the International Emergency Economic Power Act. He said that act doesn't empower him to impose tariff, and the imposition of tariff is the sole responsibility of US Congress, not the president. He cannot impose tariffs on the grounds of trade deficit, which he used. So that was a problem. And so within hours of Supreme Court judgment, Trump team imposed 10% tariffs under another section, another act. So under Section 122 of US Trade Act 1974, they imposed 10% tariff on uniformly on everybody in the world. Now let's understand what happened. With this reciprocal tariff gone and everybody facing 10% uniformly, you have a trade deal or no trade deal. So what people having trade deal think? I surrendered so much to Trump. I am paying 10% still. And the other guys, they didn't have a trade deal. They are also paying trade deal. So why the hell I should honor these trade agreements? So that's the thought going on. We in India, we have not completed the trade deal. We are in the process of negotiating. We signed one elementary document called Joint Statement on February 6th with Mr. Trump, wherein he said he'll be cutting tariffs from 25% to 18%. Now that 18% is gone in the air, we also have to pay 10%. So everybody is thinking, what's the need for doing a trade deal when everybody is paying 10% with or without trade deal? So that's the basic dilemma. And Malaysia walked out of this. Others are still thinking, Europe, Japan, everybody is thinking because they cannot justify the trade deal anymore to their domestic constituents. So I think more walking out will be there. So America realized this, and Trump started threatening in his State of Union address in, January. He said anybody walking out of the trade deal will get bigger tariffs. He was simply intimidating the world like a bully. But they knew that sheer plain intimidation, hollow intimidation may not work. So that's where the Section 301 investigations entered. Trump administration said they initiated 2 Section 301 investigations. Section 301 of Trade Act 1974, it empowers America to investigate any practices in any of the partner countries which hurts American exports to that country. So America says it will be investigating 60 trade partners, including Europe, Japan, South Korea, India, China, everybody. And whether they have overcapacity, because overcapacity means they will be dumping their goods to the US. So for US, if you are exporting, that means you have surplus. That's why you are exporting. So all the Ricardo theory, everything, they send to the dustbin. Second, he says you should not be using forced labor in your supply chains. So he'll be investigating these, and the basic idea is that to keep pressure on the countries through this Section 301 so that they don't walk out of the trade deal. I think that's the basic idea, but it pissed off the countries very much. Now suppose you are European Union or Japan. You say, my God, I have surrendered so much to the trade deal. I'm still in the trade deal, but still you are investigating me. Even after the trade deal, so what's the certainty that tomorrow you will not impose many more tariffs because they may impose more. So world is totally uncertain right now. We are at this point of time, and I think more people will take decisions like Malaysia. They have to just shed the fear of American market for some time.
Sir, in all honesty, so I was reading the Section 301 press release, and it is so absurd that it's not even that you are using forced labor, therefore we are investigating you. It is that you are not doing enough to stop the imports of forced labor into your country, and therefore the US will investigate you. So it's just naked bullying, sir.
Sir, my question will sort of start from where you left off, which is the interim trade agreement that sort of the US had with India, right? And one of the tenets of the agreement, so to speak, which has now, I guess, been scrapped, is that India will have to sort of forego or reduce the imports of sort of Russian oil. If you were a negotiator in an agreement of that sort with the US, right, how do you think about India's sovereignty across the board, right? Because that's something that a major critique levied on that agreement was that India let go of, its national energy security. But did India have another choice in that sort of matter?
As we have been taught, all of us have been taught since our childhood that we should take decisions which are good for the country in the long term, and we should not compromise on the basic integrity, basic principles of goodness. So I think we should have taken straight decisions, and we should not have agreed to America, knowing fully well that much bigger powers, much bigger than us, like European Union, Japan, everybody has collapsed before America. But my personal stand is that we should take principled stand. We should not have agreed to that. We should have continued buying Russian oil. We should say, America, no, sorry, it's our sovereign decision. We'll continue buying from Russia. Today, 50% of our oil comes from West Asia. That's disputed territory now because of war. 35% last year came from Russia. That's also contested because of American sanctions and so many other things. So 85% of your oil is contested in a country like India, where we import 90% of the oil we consume in India. There, 85% disputed. My God, we already see this just 1 month into this Iran war. We are not a party to the war, but you see the impact on India across the streets. And if war continues, we'll see the worst impacts. So we should be very straight while talking about energy security, of course, about other things also, but energy security, my God, even if small disruption is there, because we are so much import dependent, and our 85% sources are disputed. Russia is disputed, West Asia is under war. What to do? I think the first priority before the government should be to clean up our energy sourcing. We should tie up with Russia for long-term supplies, say 50 years, 30 years. We should contact Russia at the special prices like we were getting earlier. And we should tie up with other countries. We should not be dictated by America or anybody, because we have seen what America is doing. America is just plundering oil here and there. They invaded Venezuela. Nobody, no European Union, no Japan has guts to even criticize, forget about taking any action. We cannot, it's bad for any country, including our country. We should act straight. If some loss is there, we should be willing to suffer that. But long-term interests of the country, we cannot be sacrificed.
Understood. And like that sort of also leads to sort of the next question that I was going to ask, which is understandably, let's say that we do sort of not adhere to sort of the US demands, right? How do you view India's sort of actual position in the world, especially with respect to all the trade deals that we've been signing, right? We signed a trade deal with the EU, one of the largest, I believe. In the past 3 years, we've signed deals with the UAE, Oman. How do you view these trade deals? What is the kind of negotiating power, or rather win-win, that India and the other countries sort of foresee in that?
Okay, before that, let me tell you what happened to India-US trade last year. Mr. Trump put tariffs, 50% tariffs for many of the months on us last year. So what happened to the trade? Monthly trade was down, for example, between April 25, if we compare December 25 exports of India to US with exports of India to US in April 25, exports were down by 22%. But if you look at the full year data, January to December 2025 over January to December 2024, our exports grew by 15%. So all these tariffs, they were fine. Monthly variations were there, but annually we are all right. We grew by 15%. So we make a lot of noise. Media focuses on everyday events, but in the long term, I mean, 1 year is not such a long term thing. In the medium term, we were doing good. There was no losses on this. Now, so I say we should not be scared too much about any particular country taking any absurd decisions. We should not compromise our long-term integrity for that. Now, replying to your FTA questions, if I consider our joint statement with the US signed on February 6, or announcement that EU deal is complete, India-EU FTA is complete, then if I include these two, then India has completed 20 free trade agreements so far, and out of 20, 10 have been completed in the past 5 years only. That means we have free trade agreements with almost all countries of importance now, except probably China. Even with China, we have a small trade agreement called Asia Pacific Trade Agreement, where we exchange tariff concessions on 1/3 of the product lines. With this, we consider FTA as our top export promotion strategy. Initially, the FTA exercise was limited to East Asian economies. We did our first FTAs with ASEAN, Japan, South Korea, and then we moved towards Western side in the past 5 years. UK, EU, Switzerland, Norway, so many other countries. So both Eastern side, Western side, we completed this. We feel that FTAs will provide us certainty. Except for US, every country will offer every country honors its trade agreements. If they committed to a zero tariff access on certain products, it will be ensured till we come out of the FTAs, and that rarely happens. So FTAs will provide certainty of Indian export to the world, except to the US. That's a good point.
The one thing that I've been wondering, both of us have been wondering at sort of markets, is how do we sort of understand India's trade history of the last 5 years versus India's trade history overall, right? Because after 1991, India wanted to try its hand on export-led growth. Didn't work in many cases. India signed many FTAs, as you said, most notably with a lot of Asian nations, ASEAN nations, and many of those FTAs didn't work out for a lot of reasons, primarily from what I understand, due to a lack of complementarity. How do you sort of view what's happening now in the backdrop of sort of India's general trade history?
Let me answer about the issue of complementarity. If you do an FTA with the country which produces similar kind of things like you do, then there's a problem. If they are more competitive, say if I sign an FTA with China and I say I make tariffs on garments zero or shoes zero, then China's, we both manufacture garments, we both export, but we know that they make better quality garments in many categories, formals especially, or synthetic garments, and they are far better than us. And if we do an FTA, we remove the tariffs, they will swamp us. So complementarity is very important. And the other example is the FTA with the European Union. So European Union, we have almost near perfect product complementarity. For example, Europe is into upstream products. For example, Belgium supplies the rough diamonds. We import from there, we polish them, exports worldwide. They supply electronic components. So we use them to assemble electronic products like smartphones, export to whole of the world. They supply metal scrap. We make steel or aluminum rods and export to the whole of the world. Then we make labor-intensive goods. We process fuels, like we import crude oil, convert it to petrol, diesel, and export it there. And we assemble these things. So Europe is not into labor-intensive goods. They don't process fuel. They don't assemble goods. So if our exports to the US grow after FTA, then the European industry will not be hurt. What will happen at max is that they will start buying more from us and less from others. But their industry will not be hurt, and there will be value chain integration because we are buying raw material from them in many cases. Europe, on the other hand, they are into high-tech capital-intensive industries, high-tech pharma, high-tech medical devices that we don't make. So when they come, their export to India increases, our industry will not be hurt. So this product complementarity is a great part of doing an FTA with the developed countries, where I think our products are different, and that we cannot say with export with our, say, if we do an FTA, proper FTA with China, which we have not done full FTA, that may not be applicable.
Understood. And what is the sort of delta that you see with a trade deal? Like, how much does a trade deal with, say, the EU moves the needle in terms of economic growth? Like, could you help us visualize that in not necessarily numbers, but like, yeah, like
So
in
to
material
just
terms?
so to just like maybe poke a little further on that question, I think the thing that maybe as people who are just trying to understand how an economy works, we sort of struggle to understand, right? Is how much is a country's trade whatever position just a matter of getting the basics right, like how is my industrial competitiveness, how is my logistics performance, etc. And what on top of that does a trade deal give or not give me?
Yeah, I think this is the most important question. I wish we understand the answer in detail, in depth. And I think this question is not discussed. This should be discussed at all the levels in our country. So my take is this: trade agreements, they are just the periphery. If you have a good product, it will sell. Suppose we are inventor of a great product, as I say, satellite or some new kind of quantum computers or next generation of smartphones. We are the inventors. I mean, that means we own the IP or new kind of fabric, new kind of metal which can be used for making medical equipments. Then we can charge 500% premium, it will sell. Say Apple charges more than 100% profit margin on each of its smartphone. It sells, people buy. It doesn't need to advertise much. It advertises, but doesn't need to advertise much for this. So basic game is product. And if your product is good, trade deal is okay. Without trade deal also it will go. China did not have trade deal till 2000 with any major power. And they were already one of the largest exporters, maybe after Germany. I think they were the second largest before joining WTO because of the product strength. They didn't have the branded products also then. Now they have many. They didn't have branded products also then. They were just making products in other European companies, the American companies, and then selling. We don't talk about these things. Our focus is mostly on, say, trade deals. So two things I'll say. We were very good till about 20 years back in labor-intensive goods because raw material was available in India, garment, textiles, handicrafts or leather goods or low-end engineering goods where metals, we make everything. We are very good. But now we are beaten in most of the labor-intensive goods by smaller countries. We don't use technology in this. For example, if I talk about garments, so our export of garment last year was about $15 billion worldwide. How much Bangladesh exported? More than $50 billion. Why? It's such a low technology thing. Not because their labor is cheap. Of course, their labor is cheap, but there's something else. So what I say is, if we go into deep about the garments, you will find that 70% of the garment sales world over is synthetic garments, mixed garments, sportswear, winter wear. Our share in that 70% is very low. We have not focused. Why? Because that category developed after 1990s, and whatever product expertise we developed till 90s, it has not improved too much in the post 90s. We were very happy that we are liberalizing, opening to the world and generating new entrepreneur, but we have not looked into product development. That was the period when China was transforming its textiles, its electronics, its organic chemical industry, every industry. They were going to the basics and then transforming. It was all hard work. We didn't do that hard work. So the product profile we had pre 90s still continues. Whatever products have been developed after 90s, we are nowhere. So these are synthetic garments, or you can say electronics. We are nowhere. Why we are nowhere? Because after 90s, we are not inventing things. We are not working on the development. The whole thing is about trading. Nobody talks about this thing, but for me, that's why you see. So one is this about labor-intensive goods. Second is we are not doing deep manufacturing. Why? If you want to make smartphones, you need to make components. If you want to make high-end televisions, you need to make all the LED screens and everything. We don't make any of those things. So what we do is that we import everything. We assemble, we add 10, 15, max 20% value, not even 20%. And we export that and we take great pride. I say, okay, do that. That's a good business practice. Earn some money. It will generate some low-end employment. But be very clear that it's not sustainable model. Some other country will replicate it immediately. So we have to go deep. And one is this. And second, some good things are happening. For example, Apple making iPhone in India. So right now we know that for advanced Apple phones, the import content exceeds 90%. But we are getting the picture that many of the Indian firms, they are started making components, and we believe in the next 5 to 10 years, the local components will be increasing in the smartphones. But we need to do more work. For example, let's talk about AI, moving to the services. We are the masters of the world in software exports, largest exporter. Why none of the top software firms, they are talking about AIs? Why Servam or other AI models have to be startups by enthusiastic entrepreneurs? Why there is no big money set by our top software firms on these? Or why they are not developing their own model? They have the capability, they have the manpower, expertise. Why it's not happening? I think we need to talk these things. So in India, we stop talking about these things. We are most of our discussion is about trade deals. Those are peripheral things. They are needed. They help the country. But basic focus should be on the products. We were better than China in electronic hardware pre-90s. We were making and exporting more APIs for pharmaceuticals pre-90s than China. We are now totally dependent on China because post-90s we have stopped thinking about these things.
Funny you mentioned that because both what I'm going to say next and the next question will be sort of tied in. So we had a founder of printed circuit boards on a podcast on markets earlier. His name is Murali Srinivasan. He's based out of Bangalore, and he said a lot of the things that you said, right? Like in the 80s and 90s, India had a sort of PCB culture, right? And then it sort of wiped away for whatever reason. And a lot of what sort of you're saying sort of tracks in. But very naturally, it sort of leads to my next question, after which I'll let Pranav take over, which is, I think what you're talking about is sort of a disconnect between trade policy and industrial policy, in the sense that, like, those are two things that in India, at least, we don't seem to talk about together enough, even though they probably should be. This is the thing that led to China's success. It is why it's the coherence between how they sort of decide what to subsidize and what to protect and how they export things, which has probably led to their success. With India, we've had protection, but without sort of export discipline, so to speak. We've also had liberalization without sort of building strong domestic supply chains, as you've pointed out. Do you think that the recent sort of push with PLIs, the electronics PLI being a success, or say the stuff we're doing with our EV schemes, are those like more coherent pushes, or are you seeing more gaps in those policies, the same kind of disconnect?
See, for manufacturing, you need to go deep, you need time. And if somebody has to start manufacturing, they have to start with acquiring land and then buying machinery and doing all sorts of things, taking approvals. It takes a lot of time in India. So I visited China many times, and you will see their plug and play ready industrial clusters where you just pay the rent and start operations within 2 weeks' time, 3 weeks' time. And those sort of culture has to develop in India. But I'll say like this, if we want to improve, we need to focus on 3-4 things, and we can do that. First is, I'm an engineer. So I did my engineering long back, and me and 2 of my friends, every year, one of my friend has a bullet motorcycle, and we used to dismantle whole of the motorcycle once in a year, up to the nuts and bolts level, and we'll clean it up and reassemble it, and then drive it. It was taking 3 to 4 days of 24-hour attention and work for us. We were not doing anything else. But now I see in engineering college that culture is basically of doing things by hand is coming down. People are more focused on theoretical things. They are more focused on IT, software, even if somebody is doing electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, civil engineering. They know less about the practical aspects of these things. So my suggestion is, one is high technology. Suppose you don't have technology to make semiconductor wafers, no problem. Those technologies are needed for less than 10% of the products. Today, we import many of the specialized nuts and bolts which are used for the automobiles, many such things. So 90% of the items, we have the capability. We have to do reverse engineering exercise in a very massive way across the nations. We have to tie up with, say, top 500 engineering colleges. We have to give them 2, 3 products. We say reverse engineer. When we can reverse engineer the pharma molecules and recreate the drug at 1/20th, 1/50th, 1/100th of the price, reverse engineering of electronics and mechanical things is not going to be difficult for a country like us. We have to do that. That will give us lead in 90% of the product lines. For 10% where high tech is needed, we don't have technology. We need to follow the model like Suzuki. Suzuki we invited in 1983, and Maruti Suzuki was just a miracle. And what it did is not only it produced cheap cars, it enhanced the productivity of India's entire auto sector by 250% the next 15 years. So everybody got competitive pressure. I think Apple will be doing same thing. If everything goes all right, in the next 10 years, we'll have a good electronic ecosystem with thousands of firms making components, sub-assemblies. So we need more such firms. One was Suzuki, second is Apple. We need 5, 10 more firms in different sectors. So for 10% where we don't have technology, we need to invite the top anchor firms. That will lead to a lot of action on Indian side, smaller firms who will be supplying to them initially and then becoming big in the process. For the 90%, we have the capability. We just ignored it. Why? It's a shame that we import these mechanical nuts and bolts and all these things. We can do that. We should focus on that. Somebody has to talk about these things. The thing is that we talk about a lot of fancy things. Fancy stuff is fine, but we also have to talk about bread and butter stuff.
I want to shift gears a little bit and just ask you about China. Sir, I think China is something that is a country that's both very easy to be terrified of and a country that I think is the only country sort of in the entire world that India can learn from, given its sheer scale. So there is definitely the case that if you open India's markets completely to China, China has this structural problem of oversupply, so we will be flooded by a lot of Chinese products. So it gets very tricky, to sort of have good trade relations with China on that front. At the same time, sir, a lot of the technology we need, a lot of the investment we need, a lot of the know-how we need, all of that sits in China. So how do you see our trade relationship with China, and how do you see us navigating all this complexity, sir?
Of course, it's absolutely in China's favor. And I don't see any problem with that, given the current circumstances of how we manufacture high-cost things. So our exports are less than $20 billion to China. Exports are and imports are 130. I mean, trade deficit is more than $110 billion with China. This is a very large trade deficit. We must do something about this. But look at what we import from China. We import all industrial products. So China supplies 30% of our industrial products imports. It's not only electronics, not only machinery, not only organic chemicals. In each of the 8 top industrial product categories, China is the top import supplier for the country. And most of these supplies, they are like intermediates. They go further into our factories where we value add and make things. For example, APIs, we make pharmaceuticals exports everywhere. Electronic components, we make iPhones, we export everywhere. So many organic chemicals are there, machineries are there, which we use to make other things, textile machinery, other industrial machinery. So while on the face of it, deficit looks bad, but the goods which we are importing, they're absolutely needed in India. And except for few chemicals, I don't think they are being dumped. We import them because we need them. That's the one part. And imports are high, but everybody imports. China is the top import supplier to almost all major countries. India is not the only one. India's problem is not high imports, even though imports are very high. India's problem is low exports. So our exports are less than $20 billion. They are where they were 5-6 years back. There's no growth in that. And So we have to focus on exports. And why exports are not increasing, as we discussed earlier, that we make similar kind of things and they are better than us. So there is little scope of exporting to China. And the things we import from them, we don't make most of them. So again, there is no competition from China. They don't supply to us garments and all those things. Our tariffs, they check such import. But we import all these things needed as intermediates for those things. Now, what should be done? We have discussed. We have to develop the industrial core of the country. That means we have to go deep into manufacturing. We should not be happy with merely being an assembler to the world. We should go deep. And as I say, we stopped developing products since 90s. We have to start that culture. We have to re-energize our engineering colleges and other affiliated infrastructure. Right now, they are dormant. They are doing something else, not making things.
Sir, would you actually like to tell us, if we do want to be more competitive as a country, what should we see, let's say, our top 3 priorities as to actually get, scale that difference?
The way I see is I will talk about competitiveness in respect of a particular product. Suppose I want to make a glass tube in India. Then who is my competitor? Say China is the competitor. At what price China is making? Suppose they are making $1 per glass, and we are taking $2 for making the same glass. So we are 100% more expensive. Where that expense is coming from? We have to see whether we are providing land at proper prices, that loan at proper prices there, technology, we are using technology, scale. And if we take care of all these things, then other things are there. For example, how fast we refund the GST paid, how much time it takes at the customs. And these things become so important, I'll tell you. When we, let's take the example of, say, a very simple product, say, gent shirts, cotton gent shirts. We are a great manufacturer. We are the biggest manufacturer of cotton yarn, the best quality cotton yarn in India. But we don't make fabric, high quality cotton fabric. Our cotton yarn to fabric value chain is broken, almost broken at the big level. Okay. If a firm like H&M or Zara, they want to make a high quality cotton gent shirt, they'll buy yarn from us. They'll ask us to supply this yarn from India to China, who will convert into great quality fabric. But China is not the best in dyeing the fabric. So the fabric will move to Spain for high quality dyeing. Spain is a developed country, their wages are high, so they cannot convert the fabric into proper gent shirts garments. So fabric will move to countries like Vietnam or Bangladesh or some other countries where it will be stitched, and it will go to their 10,000 stores all within 1 month's time. Now, why I'm telling you this? Now, if I have to supply cotton yarn and Chinese factory is waiting to convert fabric so that they can make fabric and export to Spain. If my customs take four days, then the entire cycle will be disturbed. Or similarly for importing, if I'm importing something for processing here and it's stuck at the port. So absolute smooth, uninterrupted movement has to be ensured between factory to the ship. Right now, improvements are there, but we need infinite more degree of improvements. So when we talk about competitiveness, it's a fuzzy word. I don't want to talk about competitiveness. I want to talk about a product. I want to track its movement from the inception of the factory to the ship or to the buyer, in fact, and then see where I'm adding extra cost, and I have to kill each of the cost. That's how we have to do that. I meet many of the investors. They'll say if they are making in Vietnam, they are making in India, their cost disability is 7% or 10%. How you are going to meet that disability? So one thing is that instead of announcing high-end schemes, we can also parallelly talk to the top investors, top manufacturers, and see what makes them uncompetitive in India and try to fill that gap through whatever means. So there is no straight answer. We have to work at the product level. We need a lot of expertise, a lot of passion. And this, of course, cannot be discussed in the high tables. this has to, somebody has to dirty their hands and lot many number of people. But we have people, we have passionate people, we have to just plan. We stop planning about all these things.
That is an absolutely fascinating answer, sir. Sir, I want to move to a completely different topic. So, sir, when I was in college, I studied law, and I was absolutely fascinated by the WTO. And, back then, this was in 2013, 2014, it seemed like this was the next big thing, that this would only grow from here. And then what actually happened, sir, is that ever since then, the WTO seems to have just deteriorated in significance. And now in the 14th round, they sort of can't even close small agreements anymore. So could you help us understand what is happening with the WTO and how do you see its future? Does it have a future or is it a body that will fizzle out? How do you see this entire picture, sir?
World trade in 1950 was about $50 billion. Now it's $35 trillion. And the precursor of WTO was called General Agreement on Tariff and Trade, GATT. It transformed into WTO in 1995 only. Before that, it was called GATT. So members were negotiating the tariff reductions till 1995, mostly tariff reductions. And then in 1995, we added more subjects. What happened is this growth in trade from $50 billion to $35 trillion, 600 times, more than 600 times. It's about 6 times faster than the growth of world GDP. So trade grew, and large part of the success can be attributed to the predictable trade rules set by GATT and WTO. So WTO performed great, and what it did is, first is it pressed all countries in the world to lower their tariffs, number one. And number two, it says you cannot increase your tariff beyond what you committed in writing to the WTO. So it made the trade predictable. So if I'm exporting to Spain, I know how much tariff will be there. And second is it asks Spain for, say, a glass tube, if you're charging 10% on India, you have to charge 10% on everybody else except to your FTA partners. So it made things very predictable for everybody. A small entrepreneur, by knowing 3-4 WTO rules, can be fairly certain about what treatment it's going to get, and everything on the website, everything predictable. So WTO had great contribution. And if one country can be attributed the success of WTO or GATT, is America. America made WTO what it is. Everybody gained. America gained. Developing countries like India gained. Everybody's trade increased tremendously because of GATT and WTO things. But now America sees that other countries have gained more. Since 2010, that feeling is there that they thought they deliberately shifted their manufacturing to China. They thought China will be their lackey, will be their follower, will be their servant. But China developed its own independent mind, and it's faring better than America in many things, not only manufacturing, but also technology, AI, supercomputers, and all the indices. They published more high-tech papers. They are very good. So this gave America a complex, and they thought this trade system which we set up is better for other countries like China or India. We have to somehow change the rules. So with this background, the basic rule of the WTO is that today it has 166 members, and a rule can be set only when all the 166 members agree to a rule. So there is a benefit of this. For example, WTO has all kind of members, developed countries, rich countries are there, poor countries are there, developing countries are there. And so if I have to set an agenda for discussion, what rules should be made? Because membership comes from all sort of development economies, then some agenda items will be benefiting rich countries, some poor countries, some developing countries. It's a mix because ultimately it has to be passed by everybody. If I am a poor country and you don't include for my interest item, I'll not allow you to go with your interest items. That is called consensus principle in the WTO. So now these guys, especially America, they feel consensus is hurting. They want to bring in many new rules. So we say bring in new rules, but take the approval of the WTO membership to initiate discussions. That they hate. They don't want to do whatever was helping the poor countries. They want to go solo with a group of countries. That's what they want to do. So they want to convert WTO from a consensus driven one entity to a coalition driven organization. That's the basic focus. And as we discussed in the beginning, if America says something, all the developed countries, they're too scared of America, European Union, Japan, South Korea, without applying their mind, they are going to support America. They support America, whatever America says. For example, Ministerial Council 14 of the WTO, it just ended 2 days back at Yaoundé in Cameroon. So America's full focus was that developing countries should agree that in future also they will never tax the digital transactions. So in the past we have been giving commitment that will not tax it for the next 2 years. The idea was because whole of the world economy is moving toward digital, where from the revenues will be coming after 20 years, after 10 years. So we want to keep options open for the future while we are also extending the commitment for 2 years. So America was very pissed off. And because of that, there could be no decisions in the WTO. So what is happening is in WTO is that instead of being one body, the effort is to make it into a coalition of countries through what is called plurilateral agreements. So some countries, 30, 40, 50 countries will come together. They agree on certain set of rules. And then they will say incorporate these rules in the WTO. And anybody who joins this will be allowed the benefits of that. Those who join it will not be allowed benefit of that. Now, countries like India, we fear that if this happens, then what will happen is the issues of our choice, for example, agriculture tariffs, agriculture subsidy, or any other developmental concern. Developed countries will never be talking about those things. They will talk in coalition terms. And we say if you want a small group coalition type of thing, then you do FTA amongst yourself. Why bring it to the WTO? There is no logic bringing it to the WTO. Go outside, play your games, whatever you want to play. No, but they want to distort WTO like this. And that's the game being played. And they are, so far they are not successful, but I think in the next 2 or 3 ministerials, they are going to be successful. And WTO may be losing its identity unless something unforeseen happens.
That's a very sobering note, sir.
Depressing answer, I would say.
Sir, I want to actually now shift tone to ask you a couple of questions that are not personal but borderline personal. So the first one of those was, sir, from what I could find online, you were actually part of the trade service. And you would actually know what happens in the head of a trade negotiator. Sir. I think from the outside, because we don't actually understand what a negotiator's thinking about, we end up having all sorts of assumptions on, who capitulated when, or why can't they just go and ask for XYZ. But sir, what actually happens in a negotiation? What is actually happening in the room? What is the kind of thought process that you have when you are sort of meeting a delegation from another country? Could you help us understand, the behind the scenes of how this process goes on?
So there is nothing fancy in the process. Everything is technical and very highly detailed, and a lot of homework, like in most of the serious field, has to take place. Trade negotiations, both the sides, they decide to cover some topics. For example, basic topics covered are tariff cuts. How much tariff you'll be cutting on my products. And you can include 5-10 more subjects like services, investments, rules of origin, so many other things, environment, labor, sustainability, and so many others. But the core remains the tariff cuts. So I'll talk about the tariff cuts because I was participating in tariff cuts and rules of origin negotiations the most. So I'll describe the process. Suppose I am doing an FTA with Australia. I'll see what I export to Australia, what Australia imports from the world, and what I export to the world. I mean, I have the capacity to export to the world, but I'm not exporting in enough quantities to Australia. What's the reasons for that? Is Australian tariff hurting, or some other rules of Australia they are hurting India's exports? So accordingly, I make a detailed list. That list I rely on an Excel sheet which contains Australian customs tariff schedule with 7,000 lines there. So against each line, I say I am interested in this. Your current tariff is say 5%, make it 0. Or this rule is this, it's hurting us, remove this. And they also do the same exercise. And then we exchange these things in these lists in email, all these Excel sheets. And then Both the sides, they consider each other's demands. Some things, say we consider them sensitive. For example, if Australia says open wheat or wheat exports from Australia or pulses exports from Russia, Australia to India, we say no, it's very sensitive. We are not going to allow this. But other things, we don't consider them sensitive. We allow them. They also do the same thing. So we exchange it. So this exchange happens for 3-4 months time, 3-4 meetings, mostly through emails. And we meet also once a month, one meeting in one country and another meeting in the other partner countries. And there, whatever doubts are there over the email exchanges, these are discussed. Australia will say, I'm asking you to open this, you are not allowing, and this is not going to hurt you. I have to say the same thing. So these things, they happen ultimately, and after some time, I think agreement is there on 90% of the tariff lines or products. 5-10% some disputes are there. There, it may be needed in some cases to take at the political level that as a negotiators, we think it will not be good. But since deal is important for India, and I think we can live with this, but we need to sound the political authorities for that. But that happens in very few number of cases. The rest, everything is done at the negotiator level. So that's how this happens. This similarly, a text is there. We agree on the text, how to implement this. This is one area, and similarly, maybe 10, 15, 20, 24. For example, with EU, we have 24 tracks or subjects. So same exercise, similar exercises, they take place in all the tracks. So people have to be experts in their own areas. And while we are discussing this, I'll tell you that we thought that we know a lot. But I'll tell you, when I sat with my counterparts with, say, European Union earlier, or with Japan, with South Korea, I learned a lot. They were knowing 10x more than I did. That was the very humbling experience that spurred person like me to learn more, that you are never prepared, you can never be too confident of yourself. So and the amount of work they put on this, they're so focused on the, for example, I was talking to one of my counterparts and I asked her, when you go back after the negotiations, what do you do? She said, I visit the factories and I see their industrial processes, what type of FTA rules are best suited for them. In our cases, we don't have such liberties because we have to do a lot of other work. They are supremely focused, and that's one thing. So my great learnings from my counterparts sitting with them. I mean, it was very humbling, and it made me a better negotiator learning from them. And second, one thing more I would love to tell you. You know, about 15 years back, whenever I was negotiating with, say, China or Vietnam, I saw their negotiators, they were not of very high quality. They were good in technicalities. They were knowing their subject, but they were not very articulate. But now, when I met them last 6-7 years back in RCEP negotiations, I find Chinese negotiators to be the best. They are very articulate. They are very well educated. They are very articulate. They do a lot of hard work. Same with Vietnam. Same with many other countries. I mean, I have seen countries, negotiators developing their expertise over time. So they focused on this. And that's what will happen to our manufacturing. If we focus on this, we are going to improve